Migrating to Australia podcast. I'm Grant Williams. This is Mr. David Bongiorno in the other screen, and will be the other voice that you're about to hear. It's Olympic time. I've got my sports commentator voice on, and we're coming around the back track. Oh, and it's a close one. Bongiorno's nose to head. He's won the immigration lawyer stakes. Hello, David Bongiorno.
Brian Martin, move over.
Roy Bryant or Bill Collins. That's more my age group.
These are listeners. These are famous race callers from Victoria, New South Wales. We're talking about Victoria today. The new migration year, July 1, kicked off, and the 190 visa state sponsorship, and we'll have a look, time permitting, at the 491. And in the course of the next few weeks, we'll go around the states and territories and look at the new migration program, because, Grant, you remember, and listeners, everyone should be mindful, the migration year is the same as the economic year in this country, July 1 through June 30. So we're 3 weeks and a bit into the new migration year. Happy migration year to everyone. But
yes, happy tax return time. Everyone start doing your tax returns.
That's it. Is it happy, though? Everybody wants to come, and people who are here still want to stay. And the 190 we look at today may or may not be your pathway, but at least we're going to give you some advice, general advice, because this is not a program for specific legal advice. If you rely on what we say, Grant, you are
You're a drongo, you're a galah, you're a goose.
A goose. That's one of my favourite.
Yep. You're a flaming goose, Bongiorno.
That's what I used to get from clients when I was a criminal defence lawyer, Grant. Don't be a goose, mate. I'm pleading not guilty.
At least you didn't get it from your dad. Yeah, flaming goose. All right. Now, let me set this up, David. We've done quite a few before where we've talked about the 190 or the 491. But briefly, before we talk about the specifics of Victoria, what's the pathway in terms of the progression from one visa to another, David?
We're just talking about general skill migration today, and they're choosing people onshore for obvious reasons in this COVID period. And people who are on 500s go to 485s. People who are on 485s look for a 189 or a 190. People who are on 482 working visas, they look for a 190 or a 189. People here, we won't talk about sponsorship. Sponsored visas, employer-sponsored visas are a little bit different. We'll talk about them after we've gone around the states and territories. But today we're looking at Victoria, and people who are wanting to apply for the 190 who are here need to know about this visa. New migration year, 3 and a bit weeks old, not like it was pre-July 1, different criteria. This new migration year, they're wanting people currently working in Victoria using their STEM skills. STEM skills is the key to migration, to economic recovery. So,
science, technology, engineering and maths.
That's right. That's exactly right. Very good. The 190 visa is state nominated, and the people who are eligible to apply for this visa have to have the wonderful registration of interest selected, live and work in Victoria. This is something, that's why we're going around the states and territories, Grant, so everybody gets a go. You've got to live and work in Victoria to be eligible for a 190. Does that make sense?
Yep. So and a lot of this will have been altered because of COVID, because people are not moving around. But
also the rules and regulations for state sponsorship per state, per territory, are constructed so that people cannot play hopscotch with the states, or it's quite difficult to play hopscotch with the states. Got to be under 45. So what that means is you and I can't migrate. Thank God we're already here. We'd be precluded on age.
One of the things we've mentioned before when we're talking about the state-sponsored programs is that you really need to be established in the early part of your career already before you can.
You've got to have a occupation. So it's not a free. It's not a golden ticket. You've got to have a job in your occupation, be under 45, be working. This is where it's different to last year. That is pre-July 1, 2021. You've got to be working in the target sector. This is the new 190. They've got specific sections of the labour. They want people working in health, medical...
Healthcare. Healthcare.
digital, agri-food, advanced manufacturing, new energy, emissions reduction, and circular economy. And they've also got business precincts that Parkville's a business precinct, Footscray's a business precinct, Dockland's business precinct. So applicants using their skills in the business precincts will be highly regarded, which means you'll be, fending off an offer, looking
Now,
at working in health, medical research, life sciences, digital, agri-food, advanced manufacturing, new energy, emissions reduction, circular economy.
now, what is the economic area, David? Like Footscray?
Yeah, Footscray,
I mean,
Parkville,
is
Footscray.
but is there like a designated zone? Is it like an industrial park or something like that, or is it anywhere in the postcode?
Footscray is a designated business precinct. Footscray itself.
Okay.
Yeah. People can look on the government website and have a look, the state government website, and have a look. Footscray is 5 kilometres from the city, multicultural place, fabulous place. Footscray jobs, housing, services, environment, they look at all of these things on the website. So people who are in Footscray or moving to Footscray who are eligible should have a look at this to see what it's all about.
Now, you have to be working in Footscray, not living in Footscray.
You've got the key for eligibility to be highly sought after, to be considered, is you've got to be living in. You've got to be working. You've got to have a job. You can't not have a job. You have to have a job to be eligible to apply. If you apply without a job, nothing will happen.
But just to clarify, if you have a job which is located in Footscray, you can be living in Burwood or Fitzroy.
Health, medical, life sciences, digital. Health, people want to know about health. And so health, if you're a software developer and you're working in health, that's health. Medical research. Nurses are eligible, obviously, but you don't have to be working in health. You just got to be working in the health sector. So if you're a software developer, if I use that as an example, and you're in the health sector, then you can make application to be considered for state migration. Medical research.
All right. Let's draw the long bow, David. I'm a cleaner in a hospital.
Not a chance.
Oh,
Not a chance. What you do with a cleaner in a hospital is a COVID visa if they had no other option. That's a legitimate and real way for somebody who's cleaning to stay further in the country, longer in the country, if they're not eligible for any other visa, if they're not a student.
Personal care assistant or aged care assistant, is that health?
No. Yeah, that's definitely not.
I got asked that over the last couple of days, actually. So
the one that I'm just having a little flick through some of the suburb of Footscray. Having a job in Footscray, it's a designated business precinct. I haven't been there a while. Docklands is another one.
There used to be like industrial parks all over the place. Are any of those still like development zones or anything, or have they all bitten the dust?
For the purpose of the 190, the only areas that they're looking at are Parkville. That's where Peter McCallum is, and I think is the Doherty Institute there as well.
No, I think isn't the Doherty near the Alfred? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Footscray and Dock.
But there's a big medical and research area in Parkville attached. It's right next to Melbourne Uni, so across the road there's a stack of them.
Here's life sciences is big. Food processing, nutraceuticals, cosmeceuticals. Here's an example. If you're a lecturer and working in a university, you're working in life sciences.
Did you say nutraceuticals?
Nutraceuticals.
That
not pharmaceuticals. Nutraceuticals.
That sounds like something Pete Evans would be trying to sell me. I mean, what's your understanding of a nutraceutical? Here's a calcium pill, David. It's great for your skin.
Just learn to pronounce the word then, Grant. But the story is that remember, I don't know if we did a podcast on it last year, but last migration year, doctors were getting the Guernsey for the 190 because they were instrumental in the recovery of the community, helping in the health recovery. Now they're looking at economic recovery, even though the pandemic is still running around in a new form, the Delta variant. Doctors crucial and are always going to be migration prospects. But what the state of Victoria is focusing on are these areas are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 areas. And
I'm disappointed, David, that I didn't hear podcasting in there.
it will come. If you build it, it will come. If you build
It will come. It's the future.
It's the future. How many million podcasts are there? We're one in about how many? 100 million or something?
But of the number of podcasts that have got to 20 episodes, David, that I think 7 episodes culls it down greatly.
The thing is, you've got to have a skill. You've got to have an expression of interest in. You have to have an expression of interest in. Now, the expression of interest is an important manifestation, an important representation. Your age, your English, your schooling, your work experience, something for the computer to assess your suitability for migration. If you get that wrong, you're in trouble. Now,
so there's no way around the points.
Nope, it's all points related.
Points.
This is for independent migration. Later on, new episodes, we'll look at employer-sponsored migration in this time. But the story of points is English, is age, is education, time spent studying in Australia, time spent working in Australia, offshore working. Everything has to be ready at the point of expression of interest, because if you don't have everything ready, you haven't done your expression of interest properly. English has life of 3 years for migration purposes. Your skill assessment can be 2 years. You've got to be mindful of that. Age, 25 to 32 is the golden period. Work experience is represented by tax return, group certificate, pay slips, contract, reference letters. Offshore, the same or equivalent. You've got to have all your paperwork for the EOI. And once you've done an EOI, you've got to register your interest. Living and working in Victoria is the key. If you're a student or a working visa holder in New South Wales, you're not going to be eligible because you're not living and working in Victoria.
Now just let's go through that nuts and bolts. You do the expression of interest, which is through your IMI account.
That's right.
How do you do the
and don't
register your expression of interest for Victoria, living and working in Victoria? Is
on the state government website
on the Victorian government website.
Correct. And what we always stress on this program, what we'll continue to stress until the day we no longer broadcast, the expression of interest is the most important preliminary step, and it's to be taken with the utmost seriousness, even though it costs you nothing. If you're doing your own application, expression of interest costs you nothing. You've got to get it right, though. You've got to work on the presumption that if you're invited the day after you completed your expression of interest and you couldn't provide everything you stated the night before, you haven't done it properly. Does that make sense, Grant?
It does.
You're telling the department ready. You're telling the department you're ready to go, ready to be invited.
And if they said, right, today, it's happening today, and you don't have to be able to do it.
You don't have proof, and your proof is post-dated, then you're in trouble. Everything, the expression of interest is saying Grant Williams is ready, David Bongiorno is ready. Now, the registration of interest is done on the Victorian State Government website. You answer a whole series of questions and explain why the registrar. Excuse me. Bit of gastric reflux live.
That's too much information, David. What happens first? Your application through the
expression of interest
federal IMI application, or do you do your other application through the Victorian?
Expression of interest. Expression of interest. You've got then the right to apply for a registration of interest for Victorian state nomination. The program is open and rolling. Last migration year, they had windows open. Now they're rolling, so you can submit a registration of interest anytime between 7 July 2021 and 29 April 2022. Very competitive process. It's not about, when they look at your work experience and qualifications, it's not about how high your point score is. You've got to be over 65 points to be considered for it, of course, but it's the work you have, your experience, your pedigree. And they make a point of saying just because you're high on the table, you might have 90, 95 points, doesn't guarantee an invite, like with the 189 visa. It's about, if you're working in a targeted sector, the ones we've mentioned, agri-health, food science, blah, 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 then and your score is lower, you still may be invited, but you've got to be above 65.
Mm.
Okay. Now, obviously, what happens with the registration of interest, it's locked.
Mm.
Once you put it in, it's in. So you've got to make sure you're right. You make sure you got it right. You can't put.
I just want to clarify, David, when you said if you're over 65, that's 65 points. Because if you're over 65 years of age,
we lost out over 45. That's why. That's why I'm grateful we're here already, because we couldn't migrate. So you make an expression of interest, and you've got to create a new expression of interest if your existing one's expiring within the next 12 months.
Okay, so
I've got a license.
Sorry, Dave. That says to me that if you've applied once before, you can have another crack.
You can, and there's nothing wrong with that. What you've got to be mindful of is to have a record of what you've applied for and what you applied yourself to, and they'll be checking to see what you have now and what you're applying yourself to, and it's got to be consistent. You can't bring to the table new skills and talents that you haven't declared in your expression of interest or your registration of interest.
What if you have developed new skills and talent in that time?
Well, it's a new migration year and it's 6 months. If you have demonstrated new skills and talents, you have the paperwork to verify them. We're talking about the expression of interest and anything that predates that, and the registration of interest and anything that predates that. But if there's a new expression of interest is registered and a new registration of interest is made and you've acquired new skills and talents, that's fine. That's fine, because you'll have clearly delineated period of possessing certain skill. And then when you do your new expression of interest, you'll be able to incorporate your new skill, and they'll be able to see that new skill was, or the new work experience was acquired, and the new registration of interest will reflect that. But it's got to be consistent. So everything must be declared. Now, skill assessments are still essential, always have been, always will be. You can't do an expression of interest without a skill assessment. You can't do a registration of interest without a skill assessment. The people fall down when they put their registration of interest in if they fail to summarise what their duties are, if they are not working in the relevant sector. You've got to be able to explain in the new law qualifications, what skills you have, but you've also got to show how you're going to contribute to your sector. You've got to explain yourself. You've got to say, I possess these skills and these will be instrumental in the recovery, the economic recovery of this state because A, B, C, D, E. I've been doing this job and living in Victoria and doing A, B, C, D, E. What will happen when I've made nomination is I'll continue doing A, B, C, D, E, and this will make Victoria better because.
Now, how difficult is it to tell that story, to write that application, David?
It's challenging, and you need to consider not just the box filling of an expression of interest, which is very important, but clearly articulating why you believe your occupation is in the target sector, how it is in the target sector, and what you do in that job. Because remember, you've got to be working in it. It is hard.
To actually tell that story, David, is it like one box on an application form where it's 500 words or less, or is it a free form essay?
Provision to upload. Great question. Provision to upload. So you fill in boxes to explain things, but you've also got the opportunity to provide documents when you apply. So what happens is with the expression of interest, you've got to have the material for when you're invited. You don't upload any material when you do an expression of interest. But when you're invited, if you don't have that material predating your invitation, you're in big trouble.
Let me stop there. The invitation in the first instance, after you've applied on the Department of Immigration website, the federal website, that's an invitation from the federal department to participate in the 189 program.
You can also register interest, express interest on the federal program for the 190.
And the 190, and then
But state
you
registration.
now to do the state to lodge interest with the state government, do you need to have a receipt number or something from your previous application? Okay.
Have proof. You have to have verifiable proof that you've expressed interest. The expression of interest, you express interest in 189, 190. The registration of interest for Victoria is made with your expression of interest ID, your details, and with the registration of interest, you don't upload anything, but if you're invited by the state, if you're nominated by the state, you've got to have that material pre-registration of interest. Does that make sense? Expression of interest, you're not giving them anything. You're saying you've got X, Y, Z. Then when you do the registration of interest, you say suitable because of blah, 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 blah. And you're only giving them something, the department for 189 or the state and the federal department, when you're invited.
And your skill assessment has been completed.
You have a valid
English test has been done. What about a medical test?
No, you wait for the medical because we don't know how long the processing will take, and wait for the medical when you're invited to apply for the visa, and take care of it when you're invited to apply for the visa. You don't need to have anything for the medical for the expression of interest. You don't need anything for the medical for registration of interest. Expression of interest federal, registration of interest state.
Now, I know I should remember this, David, but how long does a medical that you've already done?
They're good for 12 months. They're good for 12 months. Yeah.
So the likelihood is you'll need to do another one.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
When you look at what it costs to migrate, what you go through to migrate, a couple of $100 extra from a new medical is not really much of an issue. But if you don't get your registration of interest selected, nothing happens. If you don't get invited to apply for a 190, nothing happens. Now, what happens is when you do your expression of interest, if you express interest in a 189, express interest in a 190 for Victoria. Don't express interest in a 190 for New South Wales, Queensland, because it's going to look odd and you won't get invited. Yeah. If you register interest in Victoria, you've got to commit.
And you're going to have to tell the same story for every state. I'm really committed to New South Wales. I'm really committed to Queensland. I'm really committed to Tasmania.
So this is the thing. It's the EOI for a Victorian, international worker on a 482 or international student on a 482. The person who's living and working in the state is the person who applies for the 190.
Yeah. I was just going to say that you can't be living in more than one state at any one time.
You got to be under 45. You've got to have competent English minimum, which is nothing. People here already have competent English. IELTS test, PTE test, maximize your score with 79 plus in each band for reading, writing, listening, speaking. For PTE academic, maximize with IELTS general, 8 in each band, reading, writing, listening, speaking, to get you 20 points. Have a valid skills assessment, be at over 65 points.
Something just came to mind, David.
Tell me.
And it's totally facetious, but I was thinking about your software guy, your computer developer who has written a program for the health industry. So that the health industry uses, because it's probably able to be used in episode, and he's in the health sector. If you're doing a podcast about the health industry in Australia, does that sit?
Wouldn't work.
Oh, how is that fair?
Wouldn't work. It's contract work. It's freelance work. You've got to have a full-time job. Your expression of interest, your registration of interest. If you're not selected, you take the 189 you're offered. Evidence and support. They're pretty well. They're tough as they should be. And if you don't provide the evidence, you won't get your nomination. You get your nomination won't be successful. They do everything by email. Now, when you're nominated, it's a joyous thing. You've got 60 days to submit your 190 to the Department of Home Affairs. And you're committing to live and work in Victoria for at least 2 years. You're looking at 2 years. It's a commitment to living and working in Victoria for 2 years.
So, again, I know I'm totally process-driven, but this gets confusing for people. You first apply for the visa. with the federal government.
No,
You,
interest in the visa. You don't apply for the visa. You express interest.
sorry. It's an expression of interest, and at that point, you go to the Victorian government website and say, "I'd like to apply for this program. Please consider me." You register your interest.
Correct.
And then the federal government invite you to apply for a visa.
After the state government has said they want you.
Okay, so the state government say, all right, you look interesting. So you then go to the federal government, and what do you show them when you are actually applying? Will they already know, and will they then invite you? This is what because they haven't invited you yet.
What happens is you put an expression of interest in, you register interest, and Victoria invites you to apply, and then you submit your nomination
to
Live in Victoria.
So but that nomination goes to the Victorian government.
Yep, correct, 100%.
And then if the Victorian government, so they've now invited you and you've done the next step of the process.
Correct.
How does the federal government know? How does the immigration department know then to invite you to apply for a visa?
Great question. Victoria notifies the department. The department you're notified by email from Live in Victoria. So basically, it gets confusing. The EOI is the key to submitting a registration of interest. Your registration of interest has to be selected. You apply for nomination, and that's the I keep saying Live in Victoria. It's Live in Melbourne. Live in Melbourne, and it's a lovely portal with shots of our gorgeous city. Not quite as beautiful as Sydney, but beautiful nonetheless. And once you've submitted your nomination application via the Live in Melbourne website, they'll notify you by mail, email. Then you, on notification, submit your visa application to the Department of Home Affairs.
So it all, once the process is in train, it happens, the process of the federal government, the immigration department, knowing the Victoria keen and that you have lodged an application with them after an invitation, that you don't need to do anything. The federal government will then invite you to apply for the appropriate visa.
Victoria notify you of their decision.
Yep.
Once Victoria's notified you of their decision, you're in a position to apply to the Department of Home Affairs.
Okay. So you have to, because this is the bit, I just want to make sure that people don't think, oh, it's going to happen in the background and I just have to wait for an email. You have to be proactive in submitting the Victorian material into your IMI account.
Victorian material into your Live in Victoria account so that you are successful in your nomination application. And once you're nominated, you get your decision by mail, email, and then you've got that decision and you've got 60 days to submit your visa application to the Department of Home Affairs.
So into your IMI account.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
That's just want to make sure that people don't think that through the wonders of modern technology that one government will know what the other government has done.
They do.
Yeah. But that won't proactively move you along. You need to intervene in the process.
Because
that's what I'm getting at.
If you're nominated and you don't respond, then that lapses. Now, obviously, the hard work of putting a registration of interest in, and you're invited, of course, you're going to provide all the material so that you are nominated. Once you're nominated, they'll say, congratulations, Grant, you've been nominated. Then you've got 60 days to submit your visa application.
Yeah. So you just need to be aware of where the process is at, and you have to drive the process. If you mess up, they will know about it. But if you don't push it along, it won't just happen for you, even though you may have met every condition you think you need to make.
Victoria nominates you and you don't apply for a visa, after 60 days, you're dead.
You're not actually dead.
You're immigration dead.
Yeah.
because
Peter Dutton has said, "You're dead to me."
what happens is there's a lot of things you have to do under your own steam, and applying for your visa is something you have to do under your own steam. If you do it yourself or engage someone to do it, they do it for you for a fee, service for a fee. But if you don't move in the 60 days, you waste
You're dead.
Migration dead. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you change address, if you change email, you got to let the department know. You got to live in Melbourne know, because they're not mind readers. And if they invite you and you've changed email and you've gone from Hotmail to OptusNet or something, and you don't tell them, and then you find out it's too late because you haven't notified them, it's all on you.
David, how often do you see that happen?
A lot.
I am staggered at how many people do not have one email, like a Gmail address or an old Hotmail address or something, that they have everything forwarded to. It staggers me that people go, "Oh, I'm not sure which email address I went to. Should all go to everything."
What I see is also mail going to junk and time. That's bad.
I get a lot of important stuff from people go to my junk mail folder. I check that every time I check my inbox.
Yeah.
So I might miss out on a fantastic new offer from someone if I don't check my junk file, as well as I might miss out on something from you, David. But
you never know.
It'd be a tragedy if I couldn't get a Dyson hair wand 30% off.
We're at an age where we don't really need to worry about hair so much, but what people mustn't do, and you rightly point out, you've got to be interactive in the process. You've got to be engaged at state and federal level. And when you do get invited to when you are invited to apply for state nomination because your registration of interest has piqued their interest, you've got to put everything in. You've got to answer the questions. And when they answer and give you the yes, we'd like to nominate you, apply for a 190, you've got 60 days. And passport, skill assessment, English test, all of these things have to be current and live during the process.
Now that's something I wanted to ask you, David. What is the time remaining, the validity time remaining on your passport that you need to have for these?
You want to have at least 6 months. You want to have at least 6 months. And the story is that, but what's just to be safe, because look, once you're here, I'll tell you what happens. I'll tell you what happens in reality. If your visa expires in the course of the visa processing process, they'll just say if the passport expires in the processing of the visa, they'll simply say get a new passport, and that's fine. They'll just hold it up. You can't travel, do anything because you don't have a travel document. But the best thing to do is always make sure, just for convenience, that you've got a couple of years left on your passport. If your passport's expiring in December of this year, and you're going to apply for some form of migration on a 189 or a 190, if you're eligible, you'd be wanting to have had a new fresh passport. If you could get a new fresh passport now, you'd get it.
Did you know, David, that you can set up reminders for things like that in your phone and whatnot? Like you could set it for a year out and 6 months out so that you would actually know?
Little practical items like that are very important. Little aid memoirs are very useful. I've only had about 4 or 5 people come to me with their passports expired that I can readily recall. It doesn't happen often, but what does happen is people miss deadlines. People are pretty good with their passports, but what people miss out on is time frames. 60 days to apply for expression of interest. The little things like that are very costly, very costly. If you're claiming work experience in your expression of interest and the registration of interest shows that you've got the work experience, so you've told federal government, the state government, you've got to have your super, you've got to have your pay slips, you've got to have your tax returns, your contract. Everything has to be substantiated through the process.
So there's the warning that we always give, David. Cash in hand, bad.
The good thing with STEM-related occupations and state-sponsored occupations is they are in fields where cash payments are non-existent.
Yes. I mean,
hospitality and tourism where cash payments seem to unfortunately crop up.
Yeah, mate. And agriculture.
Now, I'll tell you what we might do. We might do a podcast on the visas that are being tossed around for agriculture, because I don't like them. The agricultural visa they're proposing to put on the agricultural visas that already exist in that space, opening up people to exploitation that is just not right. But that's another.
I was going to say, let's do one on modern day slavery, David. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I know.
It's awful. And
the working holiday visa and the working holiday visa are effectively like that, but we won't touch them in this episode. But they can be valuable springboards to better visas and ultimately a permanent residency result if that's what you wish for.
Yeah, but it will be hard work. That's what I can say. And Are they still? No, it doesn't matter. I was just wondering do you think they're tinkering around with the backpacker visas in preparation for the borders opening again, David?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
What we've looked at is who can apply for this visa, how to apply for it, what you need, and it's really important we get immigration getting back to basics. Valid passport, valid English test, valid skills assessment, legitimate employment contract. People who are listening who don't know whether their contract is appropriate or not should seek the advice of an employment lawyer. People who are wondering what it's about, employment, providing your STEM qualified skills to make Australia, or make Victoria in this instance, recover economically.
Now, if someone came to you, David, with a offer of employment or a story about their employment, you have people that you can send them to that are experts in the field?
Absolutely. I look at it for compliance with migration to make sure that there was nothing that ran counter to migration. For example, if the person had been working for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months already, and they were being given a year and they've been given a new contract, then you wouldn't have obviously a trial period because that's redundant. And the department would comment and say, hang on, they've already worked for the department with the business for 6, 8, 10 months, a year, whatever. Why do they need another trial period? So little things like that we can knock off. But in terms of I myself, if I was on a work and holiday visa or any form of visa that required a contract for employment, I would take it to an employment lawyer. And I've got a team of people I know who are in the employment space who are very good at making sure contracts are compliant.
How often do you see people bring in documents that are either not compliant with employment law or other conditions that they should be compliant with, David?
The important things for full-time work from immigration perspective, I can't comment so much on employment law, but immigration is a 38-hour week, depending on the sector you're in. But if it's a visa for migration, if it's a migration visa contract, a contract created for somebody who's on a visa, obviously Australian employment terms and conditions must apply, but it's got to be a 38-hour week. Has to be a 38-hour week. And we look at the salary, it's got to be an appropriate salary. And we look at the probationary period. If they've already worked, a probationary period redundant, not needed again. Depends on the visa subclass, but the big one is if it's a full-time job, it's got to be at least 38 hours a week. And in terms of the rest, it's always nice if you're being employed to get the advice of an employment lawyer, just to make sure what you're doing is all kosher, the contract you're signing. Nobody should be signing contracts in employment or for property unless without seeking the assistance of an employment or property law specialist. If I was migrating to Australia and I was given a job, I would want an employment lawyer to look at my contract. If I was purchasing a property, well, I have purchased a property, I had a property lawyer look at the contract.
Yeah. Granddad is not the expert.
Granddad is not the expert. That's exactly right. And also, too, if you're going to make a will, the same deal. You don't buy the will kit for $25. You get what you pay for. You go see a wills and probate lawyer and get them to draft you a proper will. We had Adrian Corbold on, and he spoke a little bit about that. And these are 3 areas you've got to be very careful with when migrating to Australia or staying in Australia for further migration. The state migration program is good, Grant. It offers an alternate pathway to certain people. and those people are already here, and it's about moving them from one visa to the other. They've got to be living and working here. And New South Wales, the Australian Capital Territory, Queensland, when we go around the country in the coming weeks, they'll all have that common component that to avail yourself of the state migration or territory migration program, you've got to be in that state or in that territory. They don't want people hopping.
Why not? Are they against hopping?
It's about...
No, don't even go there. I'm being silly.
No, but
They'd rather you skip.
It's about commitment to state.
Yeah.
Commitment to territory. Yeah. It's not about getting PR any which way. It's about getting PR in a state that you can offer skill and talent to.
Yeah. It's a life decision. It's an important decision. It's a serious decision.
We've helped many people with the state program this year and last year, and getting expression of interest right is paramount, because then you do the registration of interest and get the answers correct and detailed and everything matching with the expression of interest. You get invited to apply for nomination. You apply for nomination, get your answer, you use your answer, the agreement, yes, we want you to migrate, to apply for the 190 with the federal government. And everything has to be matching, everything has to be substantiated, everything has to be approved.
Apart from missing deadlines, David.
Missing deadlines is a tragedy because it's inexcusable.
Well, apart from missing deadlines, which is dumb because you can set up reminders to tell you things, what are the most common or what is the most serious mistake that you see people make in these kind of applications?
The most serious mistake is missing a deadline or not being eligible and applying, not understanding the eligibility criteria.
Is that common? Like, do many people get to the stage? I would be surprised that many people would. I could understand people are not being judged to not be suitable, but it would be pretty hard, wouldn't it, to and unless you're a bit of a dope me and you think, I do a healthcare podcast, I'm in health.
No, the thing is, the expression of interest should focus your mind, and if you've got an appropriate representative, they'll tell you what you're eligible for, what you're not eligible for. Where people may, and I haven't heard of anybody doing this, but I imagine people may get waylaid, may get lost in the EOI, ROI movement. I've done my EOI, what do I do next? You do an ROI, registration of interest. How long? A couple of weeks, your registration of interest is selected and you're invited to apply for state nomination. You submit your nomination. They'll say, we love it, or we need X, Y, Z. You comply with their additional requirements. You're nominated. Then they tell you.
So it's a pretty quick process, David, for them to make up their mind. For them, it's a pretty quick process, is it, for the state government to make up their mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't take long for them to make a decision for you to be nominated. And once you make that, once they say, come on down, we'd like you to nominate, we'd like you to submit a nomination application, you submit your nomination application and they'll say yes, and then it's congratulations, you've got 60 days to apply for a 190 visa.
Is there any situation where someone will contact you and ask you to do like a Zoom call or an interview or something like that?
Oh, okay. If the department want to talk to you, they'll talk to you, irrespective. But it would be uncommon, and you'd have to wonder why someone was contacting you from the state or federal government if you did your own application and they wanted to talk about it. Usually they request documentation or express a desire for material within a stipulated time frame. We want your passport. We want your birth certificate. We want your employment contract. We want your pay slips. You've got 14 days to apply to provide them, 28 days to provide them.
So they won't be asking you to submit bank account details or anything like that, and they won't be asking you to go down and buy gift cards to do something.
Not bank account details, but they want to see that you're earning. They want to see that you've got salary. They want to see a lot. They want to see everything, but they're not going to ask for your bank account details. Good God, no. Anyone asks for your bank account details, call them out and let the relevant...
Just hang up on them. If someone asks for bank account details, same as if they tell you that you have to pay a fee by going to buy a gift card
The only fee you have to pay is to the Department of Home Affairs when you lodge your
Yep.
190 application.
Yep.
You do not pay anything to live in Melbourne for the Victorian state government to assess your registration of interest, and as a result of a successful assessment of registration of interest, invite you to apply for nomination by the state. You don't pay for
And the reason I threw that in, which if you're listening overseas, you might think, that was pretty dumb, Grant. What were you getting at there? In the last 2 weeks, I must have received either by SMS or emails or people actually calling me, a whole heap of people pretending they're from the government, asking for really stupid things, just making sure you understand that once you have made applications or registered your interest in programs, the channel of communication will, in every instance, be the one that has been opened by those applications. If the state government wanted more information from you, somebody may call you, but they also will have emailed you to the email address, probably in reply to something else you have already sent them, so you will know that it is genuine. So it's really common at the moment. So just labouring the point, don't, pretty much if someone from the government rings you and tells you to do something and it doesn't seem normal, it's a scam and hang up.
Generally speaking, the department ring when they want to talk to spouses, partners, de facto partners, same-sex partners in partner visas. They might want to talk to the agent or lawyer doing the matter. They always ring with caller ID removed.
And but if somebody was going to ring you from the department, David, they would be able to identify themselves by something that was in the application that nobody else would know.
100%. And they'll also ask you to provide identification details as well.
Yeah, and probably a reference number that was on the last email or something like that, so that, or your case file number, whatever it is, not
Correct.
something that a scammer from some call center in Asia will bluff you into. So I know it's extending the point, but don't get caught out. If in doubt, hang up. They'll ring back if they're serious, or they will email you and say, we tried to contact you, and then you will know that it was a genuine attempt.
Department rang me on Thursday, and they rang me on Thursday about a matter. And we had a former team member as the lead lawyer on it, and I was a point of contact in her absence. Lovely employee, ex-employees moved on to beautiful world of corporate migration. And she rang and said, can you provide new evidence that you're in charge of the matter? And that's what I did. And she identified herself by saying, I'm calling about this matter, this client, this reference number. And I was satisfied as to her identity because she knew these things.
And she didn't ask you to pop down to the supermarket and buy some gift cards.
I'll tell you what, anyone asking for gift cards from the department is not from the department, so you'd hang up instantly.
David, have you had the call from the Compliance Division of Services Australia, and a warrant has been issued for your arrest?
Oh, I'd like to see them issue.
That one's a beauty. I've had it about 15 times in the last 3 months, and it uses terminology that they use in America. It's hello. No, that's not how it happens here. But if you've never dealt with...
I haven't got any calls like that. They usually hang up when hello, this is David Bongiorno speaking, and they tire. It takes me 5-6 seconds. I don't know, but they hang up. So the scammers I haven't spoken to scammers. They hang up when they ring me.
So sometimes I do things like go, oh, hold on just a minute, and then I'll go into the toilet and I'll put the phone on the ledge, and then I'll wait a minute, and then I'll press the button to flush the toilet. And then I come and go, hello, and see if they hang around. But I've got too much time on my hands.
My wife's great-grandmother who's passed, what she used to do was bring a whistle to her lips.
Oh, yeah, I used to do that when I was a kid. That was fun.
we're going to talk about Sydney, New South Wales, Canberra ACT next week and go around the country. But live in Melbourne, live in Victoria, living in Victoria. Well, the 491, we haven't touched on the 491. Do you want to spend 5 minutes on the 491?
Sure. Okay, what's the name of the 491, David?
The 491, Grant.
No, but everything's got it's not the going to Disneyland visa.
The Skilled Work Regional Provisional Visa Subclass 491. Now the
Field work.
What's that? Field work.
Did you say field work?
Skilled Work Regional.
Oh, skilled work. I was going to say, is it especially for researchers? No.
Delegating, sending you to Bendigo, Ballarat, Horsham, Mildura, Sale, Yass. Not Yass is in New South Wales, isn't it? It's sending you to regional areas, and you've got to spend 5 years. It's a 5-year visa. Who can apply? How to apply? What you'll need? It's the same again. You've got to have your target STEM skills. It's about working in the bush, and if you're not employed in the bush before, how's it going to happen? You've got to live and work in Victoria. Most people
are the criteria different, David?
Just got to be working in regional Victoria. You've still got to have your work in the target sector. You got to be under 45. You've still got to have a valid skills assessment, have achieved the minimum point test score. So the only difference is you've got to be living and working in regional Victoria. Living and working in regional Victoria is not a golden ticket if you don't have an occupation if you're not working in those target sectors.
And if you miss out in a metropolitan selection round, you can't then just go and think, oh, I'll apply for the one in the country.
Well, a lot of people think that, but you've got to have work post July 1, the last three and a bit weeks. You've got to have an occupation in one of the target sectors.
Yeah. So the only way you could do that is if you just got knocked back for your job in STEM in Footscray and you didn't get invited in your last application and you were able to secure a job in the regions and you could go there.
You've got to be living and working in regional Victoria.
That's it. So you could move down there, establish yourself, and then apply again. But in the meantime, you have to have a visa, right?
You've got to have a visa and you've got to be living and working in the area. And it's also, the other thing is we could dig into practicalities, the competition for rental properties, getting a landlord. It's very hard. It's very hard. You can't just up and move. If you're renting, it's not a matter of just getting up and renting.
No, it's hard. It's hard. Changing all these things. Life decisions require thought and planning.
It took a mate of mine has just switched his lease, moved somewhere else. It took him 7 weeks to get a rental property. 7 weeks.
And I'm guessing he's not living on the average or below, David. No. So it's very difficult.
It took 7 weeks. It's a long time. I imagine it would take longer in most circumstances, but 7 weeks is a long time to begin with. But it's the same set of rules, but you've got to be living and working in regional Victoria.
David, let's make sure that we do New South Wales last because New South Wales looks like it might be locked down until the end of the century.
Actually, do you know what? All of this is taking it out to a federal level. All of this is going to delay students' returns. It's going to delay the returns of backpackers on the 462 and the 417. It's going to delay, and so many people are going to be affected.
And dear listener, if you're wondering what we're talking about, because it's all happening today, and I don't obviously post the podcast on the day that we record it, Victoria's in lockdown, and we're about to come out of lockdown with very small case numbers of COVID. We expect to come out of lockdown within a week. New South Wales today had a protest against their lockdown of about some estimates of 30,000 people unmasked, milling around, and they're already at the highest numbers of COVID cases that they've had since the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, New South Wales, if you were planning on anything happening in New South Wales, just put that on hold, I would think. It's a depressing day, actually, David, isn't it? Because there's so much to celebrate going on, like the world has triumphed in terms of actually managing to hold the Olympics. And then you've got morons everywhere.
spoiling it for everybody else.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's what they don't understand is all those people whose education is on hold, who can't come to get married, who can't come to visit sick
Can't
relatives, and
come to see sick relatives. They've been denied entry because it's not compelling compassionate, or what's compelling compassionate is overridden by other factors. People still have to come. People are still coming and going, but what this does, people still come, people still go. People have always come, people have always go, but the numbers will remain low. I've got my little puppy here calling for attention, Grant.
I know she doesn't. Yeah, come on, bring her on. Yeah. Look, here's the cute. It's migrating to Australia. Cute edition.
Dolly Buongiorno.
Good, very good.
But what?
If you were just listening on the podcast, David just held his dog up, and it's a nice dog.
A 3-year-old dachshund. Her name's Dolly. She's a
hairy dachshund.
Absolutely. They're a better temperament, as a little aside, than the short-haired or no-haired or bald dachshund. Anyway, what happens is you've still got to apply to come. You've still got an exemption to come. You've still got an exemption to leave. That's all going to get harder and harder. New South Wales has spoiled the party for everybody.
And look, I don't know. This is just me speculating, but I have a feeling that moving from one state to another might become significantly different for a period of up to a year in this country. We pretty much have free travel. We don't have border checks and things like that. Apart from the pandemic, we're limiting movement. I wouldn't be surprised if it's. Sorry, David.
And fruit fly in the 70s. Do you remember border?
Yeah. Stop and put your fruit in the bin, and yeah.
Was the fruit fly. But yeah, look, it's a fair call, Grant. It's hard enough for migrants to move because of migration rules and regulations. Whether we'll be allowed to up and leave to other states and territories remains to be seen. 20,000 people protesting, 1,000 protested here, so it wasn't just a Sydney-centric protest. 1,000 protested here in non-stop.
But we have a fringe here, a very wacko fringe. But of course, David, our lockdown, and look, if you're overseas, dear listener, this will all be probably sounding stupid, but the reason we're locked down in Melbourne is because a team of removalists came from New South Wales to relocate someone into Melbourne, and they did not wear masks and do social distancing, all the things that those of us who live in Melbourne and went through that very long lockdown last year, we just do it.
These removalists must not be vilified. They lost their mother. Whether their mother died from COVID or broken heart or a combination of both, we don't know. But they're deserving of our compassion. They come from a different country. English is a very distant second language, so they mustn't be vilified. But that's how it's spread.
No. But the point I'm pushing, David, is that even though we're all in the one country, because of our lived experiences last year were very different, we actually behave significantly differently in Melbourne than I think people in other cities, Absolutely. Certainly in the rural areas, do, because we don't stand near each other in the supermarket. If somebody's looking at the milk fridge, I stand 6, 7, 8, 10 feet back and wait until they've purchased what they're going to get, and then I go in and look. People are we are just not being close to other people because we know what happened last year.
Absolutely,
it's just a shame that it's.
And I think it'll be part of our physical practice in post-COVID. I'm certainly not going to be lining up in massive queues or sharing tight spaces in supermarkets, public transport. I haven't ridden on a tram for quite some period. I've done a lot of walking, Grant. And Dee Dee, I'm not doing Dee Dee's anymore because
they're little shockers. You just don't want to be sharing a space with anyone. David,
of many people that are not necessarily cleaned after every passenger.
Now, David, you know that we're all worried about the Delta variant, which did great damage in India. Have you heard about the Lambda variant?
You've got me on that one.
No, and no, it's not from Revenge of the Nerds. Remember lambda, lambda, lambda. No, the lambda variant has just gone through Chile and I think Peru, and the spike protein is modified and looks like being even more trouble. So, yeah, so I think what you were saying about how this might be going for an extended period of time, it is. And I read, and dear listener, I hope you don't get bored with this, but I did read a long Twitter thread from somebody who was pointing out that every time someone says to you, we've had pandemics before and we've always got through them, it's no big deal. Public drainage. We didn't have public drainage systems before. Pandemics. The spread of disease through urban populations meant that we developed a whole lot of new infrastructure to enable us to live with the organisms that we share the earth with. So this is all going to need to be a matter of us evolving, changing our behaviour, recognising that we need to do things differently.
Becoming vegetarian, grant to avoid prion diseases. We've got to make changes in every area of our lives. Seriously, it's a time for us to be very sensible and considered in what we do moving forward. We really do. Now,
and don't get me started on climate change, David.
Let's wrap it up with a reminder that next week we'll look at Sydney and the Australian Capital Territory, New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory.
Oh, I thought we were going to leave New South Wales till last.
Do you know what? I beg your pardon. We will. We'll look at South Australia next week, then Western Australia the week after. Actually,
let's count it. Let's count them off on the COVID scoreboard. Let's do West Australia next because they got no problems at the moment. South Australia is still in lockdown.
A double episode, South Australia and Western Australia in one go.
All right, good, because the criteria are going to be pretty similar, aren't they?
Slightly different lists, slightly different opportunities. South Australia is probably a little bit more enticing to the migrant than to anyone migrating than the Perth and Western Australia. We'll go through it all next week. South Australia has always been a better option than Western Australia simply because it's bigger, there's more opportunity. But Western Australia is attractive to people from the United Kingdom, people from South Africa, people who get off the plane. A lot of people get off the plane from South Africa and don't go any further. 14-hour flight from Joburg to Perth.
That's right.
They're seduced by the Indian Ocean and Perth's sunshine, I think. Perth's beautiful beaches. You know what? I've never been to Perth. Have you been to Perth?
Yeah, not for a while. I think Perth was like a country town, I think, the last time I went there, except for the nightclub district. They were still building the casino last time I was in Perth. And now the casino is either, I think it's either gone or is going because it's
discos when you went.
Blue light discos, mate. That's the last disco I went to, was a blue light disco.
Paran Town Hall 1980 for me, or 1981.
I think the last one I went to was at Balnarring Town Hall, mate. So.
The blue light discos, my word. Good to see you, mate. Talk later.
Thanks, everyone. If you want to catch up with David and get some specific advice, you can do that, David.
Best way is to contact me via direct message on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is at David Bongiorno, DavidBongiorno, one word, and then we can tee up a phone conversation, because we're all socially distancing. Time zones don't matter. So happy to.
And come on, David, give out your Instagram.
No, Instagram. I'll leave you to do Instagram. Grant and I are having a bit of a gag about it because it's David_A_C Bongiorno,
and for what, a year I was saying at David Bongiorno on Instagram, and there's another David Bongiorno on Instagram.
My name and the United States would have been inundated with queries regarding migration, wondering what's going on.
Yeah, probably going or getting a whole lot of DMs going, I heard you on your podcast. Effing podcast.
That's it.
Yeah. All these cranks. Someone's impersonating me on a podcast. Anyway, dear listener, migrating to Australia, I'm Grant Williams. Go Australia in the Olympics.
That's enough from me, Grant. No Olympic talk on the Migrating to Australia podcast.
No, actually,
Ciao.